There's been a lot of controversy surrounding UFC star Paddy Pimblett's win over American veteran Jared Gordon. With a sport that relies on trash talking, pre- and post-fight press conferences for promotion, drama and controversy are nothing new. In today's video, we're going to break it down and tell you guys exactly what you need to know about the what's, the who's, and the how's of UFC 282. First off, Paddy vs. Gordon. Highway robbery or fair play? Fans around the world were in shock at the decision of a fight now dubbed a highway robbery. The undefeated Paddy the Baddy was handed the fight by unanimous decision, with all three judges scoring it 29-28 in favor of the Liverpudlian. The debate surrounding the fight continues as fans are not convinced of the result. Fighters such as Jake Paul have gone as far as to say that Paddy received some Dana White privilege in this fight. Paddy's longtime rival, Ilia Topuria, made it clear in the post-fight press conference that Paddy had lost the fight and that the win was a Christmas gift. Up next, Dana White took sides and criticized one of his own stars. Now, this is where things get interesting. Yes, Dana will always stand behind his most prized fighters, as he has done in the past with other stars that have come and gone, but you don't expect him to do that at the cost of anyone else. UFC 282 saw him fully support Paddy's win and slam one of his other stars to do it. Joseph Gordon's decision-making in the octagon was described by Dana as a horrible game plan. He maintained his criticism of Gordon's tactics, saying that there's no way the fighter should have gone in thinking he had won the first two rounds. If you think you know who won what round or whatever, you're crazy. I've been doing this for 23 years. I have no idea what those guys are going to do or what they're going to say, is what Dana said in response to Gordon's belief that he came on top in rounds 1 and 2. What's more, even more people got involved. At this point, you're probably thinking, yeah, okay, I've heard what each fighter thinks and I've heard what the president thought about it. What else is there? Well, let us tell you. In the fallout of this fight, Ariel Helwani, a longtime journalist and a person known to have had beef with both the winning fighter and Dana, dubbed the decision of the match the worst decision in the history of the UFC on the Ringer MMA show. Even the veteran referee, Herb Dean, came into the fire this time. Dana said that even if Gordon thought he won the first two rounds and took Paddy against the cage, it was Dean's call to make sure that doesn't happen, considering it was the main event, insinuating that the ref could have made it more entertaining. That's really not the ref's job though, Dana. Speaking of intense UFC things, in today's video, we're also taking a look at the top 10 times UFC fighters were robbed due to questionable scoring by the judges. Let's get into it. Starting off at number 10, we have UFC 119, Sean Sherk and Evan Dunham. There's no doubt that there have been worse decisions taken in the UFC's short history, but what puts Sean Sherk's win over Evan Dunham on this list is how the decision provoked a hostile reaction from the audience. The two fighters were a well-balanced matchup and they each held their own, making for a good fight. With that being said, most of all the high points of the bout were most certainly down to Dunham. The young fighter hurt his opponent on more than one occasion by consistently putting together eye-catching combinations. The strange part about the scoring was how highly the judges scored Sherk's wrestling. Throughout the fight, the former lightweight champion did not do much other than land an elbow at the start of the fight, pinning his opponent against the cage and successfully fending off a few chokes. Following that, at number 9 comes UFC 75, Michael Bisping and Matt Hamill. Michael's win in the UFC 75 bout held in London is considered to be a blatant example of hometown judging. The fight really came down to how the judges would score rounds 2 and 3, because the first clearly belonged to Hamill for how he battered Bisping for the entire round. The second round was a much closer call, with Bisping being able to score points from the outside after Hamill slowed down the pace he had maintained in the first round. The final round was particularly difficult to judge, with Hamill dominating most of the round with his ground game against the Brit. Bisping scored heavily on the feet as Hamill failed to maintain guard from fatigue. Even though this fight was taking place on home soil for Bisping, the crowd let their thoughts be known after the decision was read. In retrospect, it was an extremely close competition and was hard to call. We're not the only ones who were upset with the decision. Up next at number 8, UFC Fight Night 2, Demetrius Johnson vs. Ian McCall. Scheduled as part of a 4-man tournament to crown crown the first UFC 125-pound champion, Demetrius Johnson vs. Ian McCall at UFC Fight Night 2 was the first flyweight fight in the organization's history. The interesting bit about the controversy behind this fight's result was that it was not due to a scoring error, but due to a tallying error that happened later. A fight that could have been called in either fighter's favor was given initially to Johnson by majority decision, but officials discovered later that the bout should have been ruled as a draw. On the off chance that the judges couldn't tell apart from the fighters at the end of the third round, a sudden victory round rule was implemented because of the tournament style format. To think, the inability of the officials to do basic math not only robbed the fans of what would have been a great fourth round, but also delayed the tournament by months. Not to mention, number 7, UFC 143, Carlos Condit vs. Nick Diaz. The fight between Carlos Condit and Nick Diaz for the interim welterweight title at UFC 143 needs very little explanation. The nature of both fighters and their rabid fan base guaranteed that the bout would go down in history as one of the most controversial fights. The scoring of this fight most likely depended on the level of aggression being displayed. Nate Diaz came guns blazing and maintained that all 5 rounds, but Carlos built his offense on the back foot. Condit clearly outstruck Diaz according to the fight statistics, but some argued the fighter's strikes did very little to damage Diaz. Condit supporters argued that he stuck it out with Diaz admirably for 25 minutes and should have been given the decision. Now, at number 6, we have UFC 112, BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar. If anyone tells you they thought this fight was going to be simple and easy, they're right. This event was expected to be a blowout. Edgar was smaller in size and posed no real threat to Penn's crown. The fighter had seemed good, but not spectacular enough. The round seemed to be very close, with Penn landing the heavier shots and Edgar displaying a defensive offense. The general consensus was that Edgar was simply playing for points against the far more aggressive Penn. One of the most controversial aspects of the fight was that one judge scored every single round in favor of Edgar. What's more, we have UFC 31, Randy Couture vs. Pedro Rizzo at number 5. UFC 31's bout between Randy and Pedro is considered one of the most entertaining championship fights in UFC history. After all, everyone's got a different opinion on it. Interestingly, people tend to see it one way or the other. A significant number of fans didn't score the fight particularly close. Rounds 1 and 2 were indisputably split between the two fighters. Like many fans, the judges weren't in doubt as to who won the fight, scoring rounds 1, 3, and 4 in favor of Couture. Moving on to the top 4, we have UFC 20, Bas Rutten vs. Kevin Randleman. As a result of its scoring, the heavyweight title fight between Bas Rutten and Kevin Randleman at UFC 20 remains debatable to this day. One of the main contentions of the debate is the splitting opinion on how to weigh positional dominance versus offense. Conventionally, the fighter on top is winning the fight, with very few exceptions. Going against this, the judges awarded the contest to Rutten for his striking from the bottom, despite him spending most of the fight under Randleman. Many support the decision, as it penalizes Randleman for being too passive inside his opponent's guard, but we are of the belief that wrestling is too heavily scored in MMA and that Randleman did enough to earn the win. Following up with number 3, we have the TUF 12 finale, Nam Phan vs. Leonard Garcia. Honestly, this one is just a mystery. While Nam Phan outstruck and outgrappled his opponent, Leonard Garcia still somehow walked away with the decision. Garcia arguably didn't win a single round. The only reason we can come up with this is that the judges fell in love with his fighting style and judged him for his effort. Next, at number 2 is UFC 104, Lyoto Machida versus Mauricio Shogun Rua. Had the judges brought their A game for UFC 104's light heavyweight title tilt between Lyoto Machida and Mauricio Shogun Rua, what fans remember as the short-lived Machida era could have been shorter. Machida appeared unhittable before this fight, but Shogun was able to land hard punches and kicks throughout the fight. Everyone expected there to be a new champion. To everyone's surprise, including Machida's, he was able to walk away with the decision. Last but not least, the main event, UFC 167, Georges St. Pierre versus Johnny Hendricks at at number 1, Georges St. Pierre vs. Johnny Hendricks welterweight title bout is the best example to demonstrate how flawed the scoring system is. Hendricks was clearly winning the fight, having inflicted much more damage than he had received. The case for St. Pierre deserving the nod is made with the 10-point must system of scoring, and it is this fight that highlighted the need for a revision in the scoring system. This a clear indication that in MMA you can win the fight but also lose the sporting contest the same night. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about Dana's fallout? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.